It was supposed to be a fun night. A small gathering of moms watching football, drinking wine, and blowing off steam. Nothing dramatic. Just friends, laughter, and a few selfies for Facebook. But by sunrise, she was found face down in the backyard. And the people who called themselves her friends had a lot to explain. Before we go deeper into what happened that night, hit that like button, share this story, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Tamla Horsford was the only black woman at the gathering that night in Cumming, Georgia. A 40-year-old mother of 5, she'd been invited by her friend Jean Myers to a sleepover at Jean's home in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Woodley Court. The date was November 3, 2018, a Saturday night. Georgia Bulldogs versus Kentucky. Kickoff, wine, birthday cake, cozy pajamas. According to the 9 adults and 1 teenage guest, the evening ended uneventfully. A few left early. Some went to bed. Tamla, they said, had gone out to smoke on the back deck around 1:30 a.m. She was never seen alive again. The next morning, November 4th, Tamla's body was found face down in the backyard beneath the deck. The homeowner's aunt, Madeline Lombardi, was the one who spotted her around 7:30 a.m., but no one called 911 until 8:59 a.m. And when the call came, it wasn't from the person who found her. It was from Jean's boyfriend, Jose Barrera. "There's an incident here at my girlfriend's house," he told the dispatcher. "She was drinking. We went to bed. She was the last one supposedly to go to bed. And, she must have fallen off the balcony. Just like that. No signs of CPR. No sense of panic. Calm voices, odd timelines." Deputies from the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office arrived around 9:07 a.m. Tamla's body was cold. Her arms were stiff. She was still in the onesie pajamas and socks she wore the night before, her body positioned oddly. Arms at her sides, face in the grass, injuries everywhere. But no blood, no vomit, no sign of a fall having just happened. The people in the house said she must have fallen 14 feet from the wooden deck. That's how she died, they insisted. But Tamla's family never believed that story. Neither did a growing number of strangers online. From the moment the news broke, the inconsistencies began to pile up. Why didn't anyone hear a fall? Why did the 911 call take so long? Why was Tamla, an experienced drinker with no history of clumsiness, left outside in the cold with no coat or shoes? And why was the only black woman in the group, the outsider, dead? These weren't just questions. They were warning signs, and soon they would spark national outrage. Do you think justice can be served when the first investigation misses crucial evidence? Drop your thoughts below. The story from inside the house that night sounded simple. Too simple. The homeowners, Jean Myers and her boyfriend Jose Barrera, said everyone drank, laughed, and went to bed. They insisted that Tamla had stayed up to smoke a cigarette and must have accidentally fallen from the second-story deck sometime after 1:30 a.m. But from the beginning, things didn't add up. Tamla's Fitbit, found still on her wrist, showed her heart rate had stopped around 1:57 a.m. But no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. And curiously, some of the guests, like Stacy Smith and Bridget Fuller, said they were awake during that time, moving around the house. Yet not one person recalled hearing a scream, a fall, or even a thud outside. There were 10 people in the house, including 1 minor. Tamla was the only guest who ended up dead, and the only one not white. The autopsy conducted by the Forsyth County Medical Examiner concluded the cause of death was accidental. A fall from the deck approximately 14 feet high. Injuries listed included blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and torso, lacerations to the heart, fractured wrist, and a dislocated wrist. But Tamla's family didn't buy it. And neither did private pathologist Dr. Chris Sperry, Georgia's former chief medical examiner, who the family hired to do an independent review. Sperry's conclusion? Tamla's injuries were not consistent with a simple fall. In fact, they looked more like she had been pushed, or worse, attacked before the fall. Then came the timeline issues. Phone records, surveillance footage, and statements from the partygoers revealed discrepancies. Several people deleted text messages and social media posts in the hours after Tamla's death. Jose Barrera, a pretrial officer, used his government-issued computer to access incident reports related to the case without permission. He was later fired from his job for this exact breach. And there was one more thing. Why did it take nearly 2 hours to call 911? If Madeline Lombardi found Tamla's body around 7:30 a.m., why wasn't the emergency call made until 8:59 a.m.? And why, during that call, did Jose keep interrupting the dispatcher, trying to control the narrative? The audio recording is chilling, calm, controlled, no real urgency. Even more disturbing, when authorities arrived, Tamla's body had already been moved. She was partially covered. Her arm had been repositioned, and no one admitted to doing it. Tamla's family, watching this unfold, felt helpless. Their questions were met with closed doors. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office declined to treat the case as suspicious. They refused to charge anyone, but pressure was building, and it wouldn't stay quiet for long, because the world was watching now. Do you think the party guests should have been detained or tested for foul play immediately? Let us know in the comments. Tamla's body was discovered just before 7:30 a.m. on November 4th, 2018. But the chaos that followed didn't make sense to investigators or to the family. According to the official timeline, Tamla had gone to sleep sometime after 1:30 a.m. after a night of drinking, games, and watching football with other moms at Jean Meyer's house. But by 1:47 a.m., the home security system showed the back door opened and never closed again. That was the last time any record showed Tamla alive. The next major event? Around 8:59 a.m., Jean's boyfriend, Jose Barrera, called 911. He told dispatchers that Tamla fell off the balcony and was not breathing. But here's what bothered people. He sounded calm, too calm. And then there was the strange detail that they'd already moved her leg. Why touch a body before first responders arrive? The 911 call raised red flags for Tamla's family, but so did Jose Barrera's background. He was a former pretrial officer in Forsyth County, meaning he had close ties to law enforcement, including the very officers handling the case. Within hours, deputies arrived and declared the death accidental. They claimed Tamla likely fell from the second-story deck while intoxicated. No foul play, case closed, but the photos told a different story. Tamla's injuries weren't consistent with a simple fall. She had a broken wrist, a dislocated shoulder, deep cuts on her face, and injuries on both legs. The medical examiner listed multiple blunt force injuries and high blood alcohol, but the family pushed back. They said she fell 14 feet, Tamla Horsford said. But if that's true, how do you explain all the other injuries? More questions surfaced when the autopsy revealed traces of Xanax in Tamla's system, something her family says she never took. And according to statements, no one at the party admitted to giving her anything. As pressure grew, Jose Barrera was fired from his job after accessing the incident report without authorization. It was a rare consequence, but not nearly enough for Tamla's loved ones. Online forums exploded with theories. Had there been a fight? Was someone jealous or angry? Did the women, all of whom were white, treat Tamla differently? One guest later claimed she'd overheard a strange argument around 1:45 a.m. But that person never gave a formal statement. Too many gaps, too many lies, and still no answers. If you were Tamla's family, what part of this timeline would you question first? For months, Forsyth County officials insisted there was nothing suspicious about Tamla Horsford's death. A tragic fall, they said. Nothing more. But behind closed doors, her family wasn't accepting that, and neither was the public. Tamla Horsford, Tamla's husband, was growing more vocal. She was the light in every room, he said in one local interview. And I just don't believe she died the way they say she did. As the weeks passed, questions mounted. Why had no one at the party heard her fall? Why did the injuries look like more than just a balcony drop? Why was there Xanax in her system when she didn't take any? It was Tamla's best friend, Michelle Graves, who became one of the first to take her concerns public. She started speaking out online, sharing photos of Tamla's injuries, screenshots from social media, and raising doubts about the investigation. But that move came at a cost. Graves said she was harassed, threatened, and even temporarily arrested over a claim that she accessed Jean Meyer's home security footage without permission, a charge she denied. It only added to the sense that someone wanted this case buried. Then, something shifted. In February 2019, just over 3 months after Tamla's death, media outlets began reporting inconsistencies in the sheriff's department's handling of the case. Body cam footage from the scene showed deputies cracking jokes and laughing as Tamla's body lay on the ground. At one point, a deputy even remarked on how nice the backyard looked, a comment that horrified Tamla's family. Online, the case gained traction. Hashtags like #JusticeForTamla and #Tamla Horsford began trending. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook posts flooded timelines. Petitions circulated, demanding a federal investigation. Then in June 2020, nearly 2 years after Tamla's death, public pressure finally broke through. Amid national protests following the killing of George Floyd, thousands of people began revisiting suspicious deaths involving Black Americans. Tamla's story resurfaced. Hard. The renewed outrage forced the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, to announce they would reopen the case. That moment was a turning point. The GBI promised to review evidence, re-interview witnesses, and conduct an independent autopsy review. Leander Horsford, in a quiet statement, said, "We've been screaming for this for 2 years. It shouldn't have taken national outrage for someone to listen. But now that they are, we won't stop until we get the truth." But even with the GBI on board, the original witnesses, especially the women at the party, were largely silent. Few agreed to speak publicly. Fewer still seemed willing to testify. Still, the cracks were growing. One anonymous tip came in through the GBI's hotline. It claimed a guest at the party had deleted texts and changed their story before speaking with law enforcement. Investigators flagged the lead, but didn't disclose the person's name. From the outside, it looked like a case unraveling. Inside Tamla's home, her sons sat in silence that night. One of them whispered, "They think we'll forget her. They won't." And the world was finally watching. Do you think it should take nationwide protests before suspicious deaths are taken seriously? If you believe Tamla's story deserves justice, take 1 second to like this video, share, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Your support helps keep these stories alive. The GBI's decision to reopen Tamla Horsford's case gave her family hope, but it also raised a troubling question. Why hadn't they done it sooner? The original autopsy, conducted shortly after Tamla's death in November 2018, concluded that she had died from multiple blunt force injuries due to a fall. But the details didn't sit right, and when the GBI began its own review, even more inconsistencies surfaced. For one, the injuries didn't line up with the official narrative. Tamla had severe trauma to her head and neck, a laceration to the heart, a dislocated wrist, cuts on her face, wrists, shins. Her nose was fractured, and despite falling forward off the balcony, her injuries looked more like she'd been in a physical altercation, not a straight fall. Then there was the position of her body. Photos from the scene showed Tamla lying flat on her stomach, face down, arms at her sides. But physics suggested otherwise. A fall from 14 feet would have sent her tumbling, not landing neatly as if placed. The GBI began reviewing those scene photos, comparing them to the injury patterns. And one disturbing possibility emerged. Tamla may have already been unconscious or worse before she ever hit the ground. Another detail, the balcony railing. It was measured at 40 inches, about 3.3 feet. Not particularly low, but not high enough to rule out foul play either. The sheriff's department said Tamla must have lost her balance while smoking. But why would a healthy, athletic woman, a mother of 5 who rarely drank, topple headfirst over a balcony with no struggle, no sound, no witness? And then came the toxicology. The initial report listed her blood alcohol content at 0.238%, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. It also noted the presence of THC and alprazolam, better known as Xanax. Tamla's family was shocked. She didn't take pills, her brother told local media. She was careful about what she put in her body. There's no way she took that willingly. The GBI couldn't rule out the possibility that someone had slipped her something. But without knowing when the Xanax entered her system or who provided it, they hit a wall. Meanwhile, questions about the party's host, Jean Myers, continued to swirl. Jean had deep connections to Forsyth County law enforcement. Her boyfriend, Jose Barrera, was fired for improperly accessing Tamla's case file. Yet neither faced any real legal consequence. At least not yet. Behind the scenes, the GBI was quietly compiling a new list of inconsistencies. Changed statements from guests. Timeline gaps between 1:47 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. A conflicting autopsy interpretations. A missing digital evidence, including deleted texts and social media activity. They weren't ready to name names, but they were getting close. And then, in mid-2021, something unexpected happened. A woman who had attended the party reached out to Tamla's family, anonymously at first. What she had to say would blow the investigation wide open. What do you think this party guest might have witnessed? And why stay silent for years? The message came quietly. No lawyer, no press, just a burner email with one line. I was there. I can't sleep anymore. It had been nearly 3 years since Tamla Horsford's death, but the woman behind the message, whose identity we'll keep private for safety, had never stopped reliving that night. She hadn't spoken to anyone beyond her initial statement. But now, as the GBI reopened the case, her silence felt like complicity. She agreed to meet Tamla's family lawyer off the record. What she revealed wasn't a smoking gun, but it fractured the carefully constructed timeline. She said the party had grown tense late into the night. Tamla, the only black woman in the group, had joked about not being used to suburban wine parties. Some laughed. Others didn't. As the alcohol flowed, the mood shifted. The guest remembered one person, Jean Myers, pulling Tamla aside in the kitchen. Raised voices. Something about boundaries. But more importantly, she remembered something no one had mentioned before. She had woken up around 1:57 a.m. to use the bathroom. On her way back to her room, she passed the upstairs balcony and saw Tamla, barefoot, arms crossed, standing outside alone. She looked not drunk, just quiet, contemplative. The next time she saw her, on the news. This mattered because the official last sighting of Tamla had been at 1:47 a.m., when she was allegedly heading to smoke a cigarette before going to bed. If this witness's timeline was correct, Tamla had been alive 10 minutes later, alone, and in a vulnerable position. The GBI investigators took the statement seriously. They also began re-interviewing other party guests, and discovered that at least 2 had changed details from their original stories. One minimized how much alcohol Tamla drank. Another forgot to mention she had also stepped outside briefly around 2 a.m. The contradictions were stacking up. Meanwhile, Tamla's family was working behind the scenes. Her husband, Leander Horsford, and her 5 sons had started a petition demanding transparency. National civil rights attorney Lee Merritt joined the case, amplifying it with hashtags like #JusticeForTamla and #BlackLivesMatter. Pressure on the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office began to mount. Why had they allowed people to leave the scene before conducting full interviews? Why were there no fingerprints taken from the balcony railing? Why were so many surveillance camera batteries, including the backyard security cam, suddenly dead? The GBI was piecing together a broader picture. Tamla didn't just fall. She had been surrounded by people who, intentionally or not, had failed her. And maybe someone had helped her over that railing. The guest who spoke up provided a spark. But it was a second witness, someone who'd stayed silent even longer, who finally came forward with a photo. A blurry, flashlit image taken at 1:58 a.m., just moments after Tamla was last seen. What it showed would shift the course of the entire case. What do you think that photo might reveal? And why keep it hidden all these years? The photo wasn't meant to exist. Snapped accidentally, it had stayed buried in the iCloud of one of the party guests. She had taken it to capture a silly moment. Someone was joking about the cold. But in the background, barely visible, was a figure. A woman, standing near the edge of the deck. The timestamp read 1:58 a.m. Tamla Horsford. She wasn't smoking. Her arms were folded, her face partly turned, as if someone inside had called her name. The GBI forensic team enhanced the photo. There was a second figure inside the glass door, blurred but male. The frame captured a moment neither party ever acknowledged. Investigators had questions. Who was that man? And why did no one mention seeing Tamla after 1:47 a.m.? Even though this photo now proved she was outside at least 10 minutes later. The man in the photo bore a resemblance to Jose Barrera, boyfriend of the homeowner Gene Myers and former pretrial officer in Forsyth County. Remember, Barrera had been fired for accessing Tamla's incident report without authorization, and now his name was back at the center of the storm. When questioned again, Jose claimed he never saw Tamla outside that late. But investigators noted how tense he'd become when shown the photo. The problem? The photo didn't prove he was the one at the door. It didn't show what happened next. But what happened next may have been even more telling. The GBI requested cell phone records from every adult at the party. The results were unsettling. Several guests had exchanged panicked messages between 7:45 a.m. and 8 a.m. before 911 was ever called. One message simply read, "We have to say it was suicide. Stick to it." Another said, "Don't forget, 1:47 was the last time." Investigators dug deeper into phone pings. At 2:01 a.m., one guest's phone showed activity on the back deck, close to where Tamla's body was found. The guest? A woman named Madeline Lombardi, Jean's aunt, who was also the one to find Tamla later that morning. Madeline had claimed she never left her room after 1:30 a.m. The evidence said otherwise. But even more alarming, Jose Barrera's phone had been unlocked at 2:04 a.m., showing movement from the upstairs hallway to the kitchen, then outside. It looked like someone had followed Tamla onto that deck. The family's lawyer, Ralph Fernandez, issued a statement. This case was a cover-up. Plain and simple. The inconsistencies are deliberate. The evidence was ignored. We are now demanding federal intervention. Social media exploded again. #Justice for Tamla trended. National news picked it up. Protesters gathered outside the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. Even celebrities like T.I., 50 Cent, and Gabrielle Union joined the calls for accountability. But then, the most chilling piece of information yet surfaced. A neighbor had reported something weeks after Tamla's death. A strange noise around 2:15 a.m., a loud thud, then silence. The report had been filed and dismissed. But when re-examined, placed the possible moment Tamla fell or was pushed precisely at 2:15 a.m., long after everyone claimed she was asleep. If the guests agreed on a story before calling 911, who were they protecting and why? When the official autopsy report arrived from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Tamla Horsford's family was hoping for clarity. Instead, they were met with contradictions that screamed for answers. The report stated her cause of death as multiple blunt force injuries, consistent with a fall from the second-story deck, roughly 14 feet high. But her injuries seemed too severe for that alone. Tamla had a dislocated wrist, a laceration on her heart, a C2 spinal fracture, cuts to her face and legs, and a deep laceration to the head. And perhaps most puzzling, no injuries to her hands. Not a single defensive wound. If she had fallen by accident, why wasn't there a natural instinct to break the fall? The GBI also found high levels of alcohol in her system, a blood alcohol content of 0.238, nearly 3 times the legal driving limit. But family members pushed back. Tamla was a regular drinker, socially, responsibly. Her husband, Leander Horsford, insisted she held her liquor well and had never lost control like that. Friends who'd partied with her before agreed. More troubling, the report also noted traces of Xanax, a drug not prescribed to her, and THC, suggesting marijuana use. Tamla's family believed something was off. Enter Dr. Christina Roberts, an independent forensic pathologist hired by the family. She reviewed the autopsy. Her conclusion? These injuries are not consistent with a simple fall. The pattern and severity suggest the possibility of an altercation before death. She highlighted a major red flag: the position of Tamla's body. When first responders arrived, Tamla was found face down, arms at her sides. Not sprawled, not twisted, just still, peaceful, as if placed. But that wasn't how bodies land after falling from heights. Roberts also pointed out the absence of grass stains or debris on Tamla's clothing. Strange for someone who supposedly tumbled from a deck onto a dirt patch below. And then came the most damning piece. There were bruises on the front of her shins, horizontally aligned, as if she had been pinned down or restrained. When confronted, the original coroner brushed it off. Nothing seemed suspicious at the time, he said, but with every new expert weighing in, the case looked less like an accident and more like something else. Still, local authorities stood firm. No foul play. The family, frustrated and heartbroken, took their fight to the public. A second vigil was held in Atlanta, attended by hundreds. Tamla's sons held candles. Her husband gave a speech that brought people to tears. They want us to believe she tripped and fell and died peacefully. But my wife didn't go out like that. That same week, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office quietly closed the case. No arrests, no further investigation. It was a move that would spark outrage and something else. A whistleblower. Someone inside the department reached out. Anonymous, scared, but ready to talk. Do you believe Tamla's injuries match a fall? Or something more sinister? If you want more stories like this, hit like, share with your community, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps bring truth to light. 3 weeks after the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office closed Tamla Horsford's case, an envelope arrived at the desk of attorney Ralph Fernandez, who had recently begun advocating for the Horsford family. It was unmarked. Inside was a typed letter, a memory card, and a single sentence. Look again. Start with the birthday messages. Fernandez loaded the card onto his computer. It was a collection of photos and videos taken during and after the party. Most had already been seen, but one folder was new, labeled deleted. It had been recovered using file restoration software. Inside was a 45-second video. The footage showed several of the party guests: Madeline Lombardi, Bridget Fuller, and Stacy Smith, sitting on the back deck, late at night, long after others had gone to bed. They were whispering, laughing nervously, drinking, and then, out of the shadows, a voice said, "She's still awake?" Madeline replied, "Yeah, she's out front, talking to herself or something." Another woman added, "She better not throw up out there." Then the video ended. While it didn't show any violence, the timestamp and context placed Tamla outside alone, and the others watching her, contradicting prior statements that they had all gone to sleep. Fernandez took the tip seriously. He reached out to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to request a formal reopening of the case. That's when he learned something chilling. The GBI had never been involved in the original investigation. Despite being the state's top investigative body, they were only called in for the autopsy. Not the scene, not the interviews, not the forensics. It had all been handled in-house by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, where Jose Barrera, the boyfriend of the homeowner Gene Myers, had worked as a court officer. Barrera had accessed the incident report, the witness statements, and the 911 call recording, despite being one of the witnesses himself. He wasn't suspended. He wasn't questioned. He was protected, until local media got wind of it. When the story broke, Barrera was abruptly fired for violating department policy, but no charges were filed. The Horsford family pushed harder. That's when a second anonymous message arrived. This time it was handwritten. Check the front yard footage. Tamla never fell. But the surveillance DVR from the front yard, which Gene claimed had glitched that night, had been overwritten. Fernandez grew more suspicious. What are the odds the only camera that might have caught the fall is the one that conveniently malfunctioned? Then came the final blow. A local tech company that serviced Gene's security system admitted, off the record, that the hard drive had been manually reset the day after Tamla's death. Someone erased it. Why would anyone erase security footage, unless it showed something they didn't want the world to see? As pressure mounted, Ralph Fernandez began focusing on the individuals present at the party, especially their inconsistencies. Each of the 10 adults present had given statements, but once Fernandez cross-referenced their timelines, gaps emerged. Important ones. Jean Myers, the homeowner, claimed she went to bed around 1:30 a.m. She said Tamla was alive, eating a bowl of gumbo in the kitchen. Stacy Smith said she'd seen Tamla still up around 1:47 a.m. But the coroner estimated Tamla had been dead for several hours before deputies arrived at 8:59 a.m. What happened in that 5 to 6 hour window? Even more strange, no one at the party claimed to hear a fall. Tamla supposedly fell from a deck more than 14 feet high, landing face first on a hard lawn. That kind of fall onto wet ground in the dead of night would make a sound. A scream. A thud. Yet none of the adults, who were allegedly asleep inside, reported anything. But one person had been awake longer than she admitted. Paula Pantoja, one of the guests, had told police she went to bed just after 1 a.m. But in a text message to a friend the next morning, later obtained by Fernandez, she wrote, "Didn't sleep much, kept checking on that woman outside. It didn't feel right. If she'd seen Tamla outside, why didn't she mention that in her police statement?" Fernandez subpoenaed Paula's phone logs. The metadata showed she had deleted messages and call records from between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Another guest, Madeline Lombardi, also revised her original statement. First, she said she saw Tamla outside at sunrise. Later, she admitted she wasn't sure if it had been a dream or real memory. Then there was Jose Barrera, Jean's boyfriend and the only male guest. His 911 call was emotionless, detached. Yet, according to texts recovered from his phone, he messaged a friend before calling 911. Something happened to that lady outside. Jean's freaking out. Why message someone before dialing 911? Fernandez's theory. There was a delay between Tamla's fall, or whatever actually happened, and the call for help, and there may have been cleanup in between. The crime scene photos showed Tamla's body lying in the grass, face down, her arms by her sides. Not spread out as you'd expect from a fall. Her wrist was broken, her head bruised, her neck scraped, and yet, her fingernails were intact. Fernandez believed she didn't fall from the deck. He believed she had been placed there. But who would do that? And why? As Fernandez pushed for an independent inquest, a whistleblower from inside the sheriff's office came forward, anonymously. They mailed him a copy of the original call log from that morning. There was a name listed on the caller ID. It wasn't Jean's. It wasn't Jose's. It was Deborah Tatum, a neighbor, but Deborah swore she'd never called. So why was her name on the call? Was someone covering their tracks? What do you think happened during those missing hours? And why would multiple witnesses alter their stories? In many neighborhoods, tragedy is followed by silence. In the Horsford case, it was followed by missing footage. Eatonton didn't have many outdoor surveillance cameras, but some homes around 2700 Woodlake Drive did. At least 3. Ralph Fernandez began canvassing the area quietly, visiting neighbors who had security systems. He was looking for anything, movement, lights, even a shadow on the grass. One neighbor, an older man named Gerald, said something odd. "Funny you ask. The morning of the 4th, I came out to grab the paper. Saw 2 men standing behind the house where the party was. Looked like they were checking the ground." Gerald hadn't thought much of it until he heard about Tamla's death on the news. But when he checked his camera system later that afternoon, the footage was gone. Not corrupted, manually deleted. That raised red flags. Gerald's system was password protected. He hadn't shared access with anyone, but his Wi-Fi had been left unsecured. A digital forensics expert later found that someone had accessed his network early that morning, from a mobile device. The signal had pinged from the backyard of Jean Myers' house. Whoever deleted the footage had likely stood within feet of Tamla's body, hours before police were called. Meanwhile, Fernandez reviewed the initial police report again. A line buried on page 3 stuck out. Upon arrival, officers observed signs of possible post-mortem movement. That sentence had not made it into the GBI's final summary. Who removed it? And why? As the GBI and Forsyth County authorities began reinvestigating, a second internal whistleblower stepped forward. This time, from the district attorney's office. They provided Fernandez with a draft email, never sent, from Assistant DA Kelly Jonas. In it, she had written, "There are too many unanswered questions. I recommend delaying closure until we secure all phone records and neighbor interviews." But the case had still been closed weeks later without any of that being done. Even more troubling, one of the party attendees had worked briefly in the DA's office the year prior. The implication was chilling. Was this case buried to protect someone? Or was it just incompetence wrapped in politics? Fernandez didn't know yet. But then came a breakthrough. A forensic audio analyst contacted him, offering to re-examine the 911 call. Using enhanced noise filtering and waveform mapping, he discovered background audio previously undetected. After Jose Barrera says, "She's lying in the yard," a faint female voice can be heard saying, "I thought she was still breathing." That voice didn't match Jean Myers. It didn't match Madeline Lombardi. It was someone else. Someone who hadn't officially spoken to police at all. But she was at the party that night, and Fernandez had her name. Why would someone hide from speaking to authorities? And who do you think that unidentified woman might be? The name was Bridget Fuller. Her presence at Jean Myers' slumber party hadn't been mentioned in any of the official statements. Not once. But cell tower logs placed her phone at the house that night for nearly 7 hours. Ralph Fernandez took this information to the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, demanding answers. Their response? She wasn't listed on the guest list. We have no record of her being present. But the tower data was indisputable. Bridget's phone had connected to Myers' home Wi-Fi around 9:32 p.m. on November 3, 2018, and again at 6:14 a.m. the next morning. That second ping happened only 10 minutes before the 911 call was placed. Fernandez tracked her down through mutual acquaintances. She now lived in Alabama, had changed jobs twice, and refused to speak on record. When approached, she said only this, "I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't even stay the whole night." But Fernandez had security camera footage from a nearby street showing her car parked until after sunrise. What was she hiding? And why had everyone else kept her name out of the narrative? Meanwhile, Tamla's family received a call from an anonymous source, a woman who claimed to have attended a similar party 2 years earlier hosted by the same group. She said that at that gathering, a guest had passed out on the couch after 2 glasses of wine, and someone joked, "Better not end up like the last girl." That comment, she said, haunted her once she saw Tamla's photo in the news. The woman refused to go public, fearing retaliation. But she gave a name, one that matched a person on Jean Myers' guest list. And when Fernandez followed up with that woman, she, too, denied knowing anything. Then lawyered up. The wall of silence was growing louder. But then something unexpected happened. A retired crime scene investigator from Atlanta, who had quietly reviewed the case on his own, released a public statement. Tamla Horsford's injuries do not align with a balcony fall. I've seen over 50 cases like this, and this one raises every red flag. He called the official report logically impossible. Fernandez seized on the momentum. He gathered the family, the lawyers, the activists, and the experts. And on a cold Friday morning in front of the Georgia Capitol, they held a press conference. Microphones, news vans, crowds. Ralph Fernandez stepped up. This isn't about theory anymore. It's about facts, about truth, and about justice for Tamla Horsford. The crowd erupted in applause. And just as the press conference ended, a man in a suit slipped Fernandez a flash drive. No name, no words, just a whisper, "You'll want to see this." Inside were screenshots of private Facebook messages, conversations between party guests, dated 3 days after Tamla died. And one chilling line, "We need to get our story straight. Why would someone go to such lengths to erase a name from the narrative? And what do you think was on that flash drive?" If you believe this story needs more eyes, share it, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Tamla deserves to be heard, and we're just getting started. The The screenshots from the flash drive were timestamped. November 6, 2018, just 3 days after Tamla Horsford's body was found. The conversation thread included at least 4 participants. All had been at the party. One name stood out: Stacy Smith, Jean Meyer's close friend. "Let's just make sure we say the same thing," one message read. "She went outside alone. That's it." Another message, from an unnamed user, added, "We all said she was fine. Let's not change it now." The tone wasn't panic. It was coordination. Ralph Fernandez forwarded the messages to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, demanding a formal review. But no reply came. The flash drive, it seemed, was just another piece of ignored evidence. Meanwhile, the Horsford family's legal team traced the messages back to old Facebook accounts. Some had been deactivated. Others were wiped clean, but the timestamps, usernames, and fragments matched what could be pulled from archived metadata. Fernandez quietly met with an ex-Facebook employee who confirmed the messages were authentic beyond reasonable doubt, but still no official response. Back in Forsyth County, new scrutiny fell on Jose Barrera, the former pretrial officer and boyfriend of Jean Myers. He had accessed Tamla's incident report from a restricted state database just days after her death, a serious violation. When questioned, he claimed it was out of curiosity. But that wasn't the full story. One of Barrera's co-workers came forward anonymously, saying she overheard him bragging that they'd cleaned up everything before the cops even showed up. When pressed, the co-worker said he had mentioned wiping fingerprints off a door handle and hiding alcohol bottles. Again, no charges were filed, just internal discipline. Barrera quietly lost his job, but no official investigation followed. The deeper Fernandez dug, the more it seemed Tamla's case had been surrounded by silence, not just from the partygoers, but from the very institutions meant to protect her. But the most disturbing detail was still to come. A forensic audio analyst was brought in to review the 911 call made by Barrera. At the 13-second mark, in the background, a faint voice could be heard. "Is she breathing?" Then another voice, male, said something unintelligible, followed by, "We can't have this here." Fernandez froze. "We can't have this here." The analyst cleaned the audio, filtered background noise, and isolated frequencies. The voice matched one of the party attendees, but when they approached him for a statement, he had already left the state. No forwarding address, no public profile, gone, just like Tamla. And then, another revelation surfaced, buried deep in an old report, never before made public. Tamla had sent a text to a friend around 11:15 p.m. the night of the party. It read, "They're acting weird. I'm gonna stay close to the door." That message was never included in the official case file. And the phone it came from? Missing. What do you think Tamla meant when she said they were acting weird? Who was she afraid of? For months, the Horsford family had tried to retrieve Tamla's phone, a key piece of evidence that had somehow vanished. Initially, law enforcement said the phone had been logged into evidence. But when Ralph Fernandez demanded the chain of custody report, he received a startling response: no such record exists. The iPhone Tamla used to send her final text was gone. Her text at 11:15 p.m., warning a friend that they're acting weird, was only preserved because the recipient had taken a screenshot that night. Sensing something was off, Fernandez pushed further. "Phones don't disappear unless someone makes them disappear," he said in a televised interview. "And if that phone was lost, then show us the last place it pinged." The forensic data trail was chilling. The last confirmed tower ping from Tamla's phone occurred at 1:38 a.m., almost 4 hours after her final message. That means it was either still powered on or being used. But law enforcement claimed Tamla had died around 1:30 a.m. So who had the phone? That discrepancy opened a new theory. If Tamla had died at 1:30, but the phone pinged later, someone else had it. The family called for a subpoena of cell tower records for all 10 people present that night. But the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office declined, citing a lack of probable cause. Then something unexpected happened. A former GBI technician, speaking off the record, told a local journalist that Tamla's phone had been entered into the lab system but never processed. He claimed it was flagged for analysis, but pulled from rotation without explanation. Why? No one could answer. Meanwhile, Fernandez launched a civil request for surveillance footage from the neighborhood. A nearby home had a camera facing the driveway of the party house. The timestamp on one clip, 1:41 a.m. The grainy footage showed a dark SUV pulling up briefly, headlights off. Person got out. A small object, possibly a phone, was tossed into the passenger seat. Then the SUV drove away. When investigators asked if anyone at the party had left and returned, the answer was unanimous. No one left, but the footage suggested otherwise. Fernandez tracked the SUV's plate with the help of a private investigator. It belonged to a relative of one of the partygoers. Confronted with this, the partygoer's story shifted. First, they denied the SUV was theirs. Then they said they let a friend borrow it. No name, no phone number, just silence. But silence at this point spoke volumes. Tamla's missing phone might be out there, and it might hold everything. Do you believe someone took Tamla's phone to hide what really happened? And if so, why haven't they been charged? As the Horsford family pressed for justice, another troubling discovery came to light. One buried inside the retrieved Facebook messages between Tamla and her friend Michelle. Michelle had messaged Tamla that night at 11:17 p.m., just 2 minutes after Tamla's final text. But for months, she assumed Tamla never responded. It wasn't until Fernandez demanded a data request from Meta that they uncovered a deleted reply. Tamla had written, "They're acting like I don't belong here. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. It's crazy." The message was timestamped 11:19 p.m., then marked deleted at 3:22 a.m. But Tamla was already dead by then, according to official reports. So who deleted the message? Meta's forensic logs identified the deletion as coming from a device using Tamla's login, but on a different IP address than her home or her phone. Someone had accessed her account using another device. The access came from an IP linked to a home 2 streets away from the crime scene, belonging to a family friend of one of the partygoers. When asked, the partygoer denied any connection. But further digging revealed the relative had once worked in IT security. Fernandez now had more than just suspicion. He had a digital trail. He filed for a subpoena to seize the router logs from the relative's home. It was denied. Why? The Forsyth County DA's office claimed it fell outside the scope of the reopened investigation. So Fernandez went public. In a viral press conference, he read the deleted message aloud, voice steady. Tamla tried to speak. Even in her final moments, she was reaching out. The press ran with it. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag justice for Tamla. Hashtag find the phone. Hashtag who deleted the message. But pressure wasn't only mounting online. A whistleblower from inside the original sheriff's department came forward, anonymously. In a recorded conversation, they said, there was talk early on about wiping digital traces. Someone joked that the dead don't need Facebook. I thought it was sick. The audio was leaked. Now, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had no choice but to look again. In response to media attention and growing public pressure, the GBI reopened the digital forensics file, this time with oversight from an independent panel. And what they found inside the cloud backup of Tamla's phone would shift everything. A voice memo, recorded shortly after midnight. Tamla's voice, slurred maybe from alcohol but clear. I don't know why they're looking at me like that. I just came to have fun. The memo ends abruptly. And the timestamp? 12:14 a.m., 2 hours before she was declared dead. Why do you think someone would go to such lengths to erase Tamla's digital footprint? What were they so afraid of? The voice memo had shaken everyone. Tamla Horsford's own voice, confused, vulnerable, and recorded at 12:14 a.m., well after most guests claimed she had gone to bed. It didn't fit the timeline, contradicted the story, but it was the second memo, buried deeper in her iCloud backup, that stunned even the most seasoned investigators. At 1:38 a.m., another recording began. This one was longer, picked up background voices, faint but audible. A woman's voice, angry. I told her to stop talking. Why is she still here? Then a male voice. Just let her go inside. She's drunk. Tamla's voice cut in. I'm not going anywhere. I didn't do anything to you. The file ended abruptly, just static for the last 10 seconds. That recording had never been mentioned by the original investigators. It wasn't part of the GBI's original 2019 findings. So how did it resurface now? Because Tamla's phone had been synced with a forgotten tablet, left in her teenage son's room. And when the Foundation's legal team requested every cloud-linked device, the tablet was included. The memo had been stored locally, never deleted. And now it was damning. Public response was immediate. Protests reignited. Civil rights groups joined in. Even celebrities began posting Tamla's photo again with the words, "Say her name." Fernandez demanded a full re-interview of every adult at the party. 2 refused. 1 lawyered up. But then a breakthrough. A new witness came forward, not from inside the party, but someone who had seen the house from across the cul-de-sac. He had been walking his dog around 1:45 a.m. and noticed a group of people standing on the back deck. Voices raised, some kind of argument. He saw someone step toward the railing. Then silence. The man had assumed it was just drunk party guests. Now he wasn't so sure. He shared his memory. The GBI reopened the physical scene with drones and new scanning technology, reconstructing the deck, trajectory, and the potential fall. They concluded one thing. Tamla didn't fall by accident. There were defensive bruises on her forearms. The angle of the fall didn't match a simple trip. And her wrist was broken in a way consistent with trying to stop a fall or being pushed. The final autopsy reclassification was issued quietly. Cause of death, homicide. But the names behind it, still sealed. The case was officially reopened. Charges were being considered. The family, while heartbroken, stood outside the courthouse holding a single sign. Tamla Horsford deserves justice. Because justice delayed is still not justice denied. If you believe this story deserves national attention, like, share it, subscribe to this channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. As news of the homicide reclassification broke, the public wanted names. Who had pushed Tamla? Who stood by and watched? Who lied? But the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, now facing national scrutiny, held firm. The investigation was active. Names of those under scrutiny were sealed. Even the newly discovered audio files were not yet admissible in court. Still, inside sources began to whisper. 2 individuals were named off the record, both party attendees, both with prior disciplinary history in their professions. One had quietly moved out of Forsyth County. The other still lived just minutes from Tamla's old neighborhood. Then came the leak. A sealed deposition was anonymously shared with an investigative journalist. It contained a statement from Stacy Smith, a friend of the host, Gene Myers. Stacy admitted in her testimony that she saw Tamla arguing with someone on the deck around 1:40 a.m. She didn't name who, but she said the voice was male. She claimed she went inside because she didn't want to get involved. Her final line? I thought they were just drunk. I didn't know she'd end up dead. The deposition, once leaked, exploded online. Hashtags surged again. Hashtag justice for Tamla. Hashtag who was on the deck. The Horsford family attorney demanded the GBI release all sealed depositions under the Georgia Open Records Act. The request was denied, citing active litigation. But the pressure worked. The GBI quietly called a federal grand jury. Gene Myers, the homeowner, received a subpoena. So did Stacy. So did Jose Barrera, the former probation officer who was caught accessing police files in the days after Tamla's death. The web was tightening. Meanwhile, Tamla's family, though exhausted, pushed forward. Her husband, Leander Horsford, gave an emotional interview on national television. I don't want revenge. I just want the truth. Our sons deserve that. He talked about Tamla's smile, her love for football, how she baked cookies every Sunday night. He held up a photo of her last birthday, just weeks before she died. That woman didn't jump. Someone made sure she didn't come home. The interview sparked a wave of new tips. One tip came from an anonymous former coworker of Jean Myers. She claimed Jean had once said, "Some people can't handle their liquor. It's not our fault." The phrasing sent chills. That tipster agreed to testify. The grand jury proceedings remained closed to the public. But something was clearly shifting. For the first time, the Department of Justice sent a representative to observe. And on the courthouse steps, reporters began camping out again. What was once a cold case had turned red hot. Inside the courtroom, someone finally cracked under pressure. And what they revealed would blow the case wide open. What do you think they said? Drop your theories in the comments. Inside the closed-door federal grand jury, the questions were direct. The witnesses, uneasy. But when Jose Barrera took the stand, the room tensed. He was no longer a probation officer. He'd lost that job when it was discovered he'd accessed confidential police files about Tamla's death from his work computer. Still, Jose had never faced criminal charges. Until now, the federal prosecutor started with simple questions. Did he see Tamla fall? No. Was he on the deck that night? No. Had he spoken to her after midnight? He hesitated. I think I was already asleep. But then came the evidence. A newly recovered Snapchat video from one of the other women, time-stamped at 1:47 a.m., showed Jose awake, in the kitchen, laughing and holding a beer. In the background, you could hear voices. One clearly said, "Let her go. She's fine." Another said, "Don't push it." And then a slamming door. Jose's face reportedly went pale when confronted. He claimed he didn't remember the video, claimed the voices weren't his. But when the audio was isolated and enhanced by FBI tech teams, a male voice matching his said, "She's not even supposed to be out here." The implication was chilling. Tamla had been outside, alone or not, against someone's wishes. Then came the second bombshell. The GBI had run a series of digital reconstructions based on Tamla's injuries and the physics of the deck. They concluded that the fall pattern didn't match a forward fall over the rail. Instead, it aligned more with being pushed or flipped backward. Her injuries suggested she landed flat on her back, not face down as initially reported. That changed everything. Jean Myers was next. On the advice of her attorney, she refused to answer several key questions, invoking the Fifth Amendment. But the grand jury wasn't finished. Another party guest, Bridget Fuller, had returned from Florida and was subpoenaed. She was drunk that night, she admitted, but she remembered Tamla wanting to go outside to smoke alone. And that someone, maybe Jean or Stacy, told her not to go. She didn't listen, Bridget said. She was sweet but stubborn. But then Bridget added something else. When she woke up and saw the police, she overheard Jean say, "We don't talk to reporters. Not now. Not ever." The web of silence was unraveling. The grand jury proceedings were supposed to stay secret. But one leak changed that. A reporter from 11 Alive confirmed that the Department of Justice was weighing federal obstruction charges against at least 2 individuals involved. Outside the courthouse, Tamla's family stood silently. Her son, Leander Jr., now a teenager, held a photo of his mother. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The fight was far from over. And then came the next twist. An envelope arrived at the Horsford attorney's office. No return address. Inside, a printed screenshot of an iMessage conversation between 2 of the women from the party. One line stood out. What if they find out about the second balcony? What second balcony? And why had no one mentioned it before? The phrase from the anonymous screenshot hit like a thunderclap. What if they find out about the second balcony? Investigators scrambled to re-examine every detail of the Forest County home where Tamla had died. Until now, the focus had been on the main back deck, the one where Tamla's body had been found. But floor plans revealed something easily overlooked. A smaller, private balcony, accessible only from the primary bedroom. And that room? It belonged to Jean Myers. Investigators returned to the scene with renewed urgency. The second balcony had been scrubbed clean, but a forensic team brought new tools, luminol, infrared scanners, and particle sweepers. What they found changed everything. Microscopic blood traces, not visible to the naked eye, but present on the balcony rail, doorknob, and porch floorboards. It wasn't enough to confirm violence, but it was enough to raise serious suspicion. For the first time, Jean Myers was officially named a person of interest. Inside her interview room, agents laid out photos of the balcony, the forensic evidence, and the newly leaked text message. Jean asked for a break, then requested a lawyer. The interview ended there, but the case didn't. Digital forensics dug deeper, and that's when Tamla's Fitbit came into play. The device had been returned to the family early on, thought to be irrelevant. But now, analyzed by an FBI tech team, it showed something chilling. Tamla's heart rate didn't flatline at 1:47 a.m., the original estimated time of death. It continued until 2:28 a.m., which meant that Tamla was alive, possibly injured, possibly unconscious, for nearly 40 minutes longer than police had first claimed. What happened in that time gap? Who was with her? Who failed to call for help? Then came a second anonymous tip. A message sent to the family's attorney from an encrypted account. It read, "Check Jose's deleted files. He had a photo. It was taken from above." A court order was swiftly filed. Within 48 hours, forensic recovery experts had extracted deleted files from Jose Barrera's old work phone, the same phone he'd accessed police reports on, and buried deep within a recovery folder was an image, time-stamped at 2:11 a.m. on the night of Tamla's death. The image showed the backyard, and Tamla's body. She was lying on the ground, but the angle was unusual. The photo had been taken from a high elevation, as if from the second balcony. The image had a blurred finger over the edge, but the metadata didn't lie. It had come from Jose's device. Why was he awake at 2:11 a.m.? Why was he photographing the scene before anyone called 911? And then came the final blow. A voice message, recovered from a party guest's backup iCloud folder, time-stamped at 2:16 a.m. A female voice, whispering, "We need to get our story straight." Who was she talking to, and what story did they need to fix? The recovered voice message was short, just 8 words, but in those words, everything changed. "We need to get our story straight." It wasn't background noise or some muffled party chatter. The voice was clear, female, nervous. A forensic linguist compared it to known recordings. The match? Madeline Lombardi. Madeline had always been painted as the quiet one at the party, the one who'd gone to bed early, who didn't see or hear anything. But that voice message was captured at 2:16 a.m., 12 minutes before the 911 call, and it wasn't the only thing that surfaced. A second file, recovered from the same cloud folder, included a short video clip, just 5 seconds long. It showed Tamla's body, still, lifeless, face down. The timestamp? 2:13 a.m. It was filmed from inside the house, which meant someone saw her, someone knew, and yet, no one called until 2:30 a.m. When investigators re-interviewed Madeline, she denied everything, claimed she had no idea where the footage came from, said her iCloud must have been hacked, but the metadata once again betrayed her. The clip was uploaded from her device. Meanwhile, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was forced to revisit their original report. In a quiet but significant move, they reclassified the case from accidental death to suspicious circumstances. Civil rights attorney Lee Merritt, who had joined the Horsford family's legal team, released a statement. "This case is no longer about a fall. It's about silence. It's about fear. And it's about justice being delayed because of who was involved." As the case gained momentum, so did public pressure. Activists launched the hashtag Justice for Tamla, and national media began to pick it up again. Talk shows, podcasts, even an upcoming Netflix documentary. But perhaps the most powerful response came from Tamla's husband, Leander Horsford. He stood on the courthouse steps, holding a photo of Tamla and their 6 boys. "I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for truth, and I'm still waiting." Then, for the first time, he shared something personal. "Tamla had sent me a message from the party that night. Just one line, 'Everyone here is cool. I'll call you in the morning.' She never got the chance." Viewers around the country began writing to local prosecutors, demanding the case be reopened fully. not just in name but in action. And it worked. The Forsyth County District Attorney announced the formation of a special investigative task force, one that would operate independently, with full access to FBI forensics, cloud data, and all suppressed records. Tamla's name was no longer just part of a cold file. She was a cause, a symbol of what happens when people in power close ranks. And as the task force began interviewing witnesses under subpoena, one name came up again. Stacy Smith. She had never been interviewed under oath. Until now. But would she talk? If this case moved you, don't scroll past. Like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Your voice helps bring justice closer. Stay with us, this story isn't over. When Stacy Smith finally walked into the interview room, she looked calm. Too calm. Unlike the others, Stacy had never given a sworn statement. She'd submitted a casual recount, a handwritten note, saying she'd gone to bed around 1:30 a.m. and hadn't heard a thing. But the forensic timeline was already poking holes in her story. Investigators began with simple questions. When did you last see Tamla alive? What did you do between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m.? Stacy sipped from her water bottle, then gave a tight smile. I went to bed. I don't know anything more than what I've already written. But when shown the metadata of the recovered video, the one showing Tamla's body at 2:13 a.m., her hands trembled slightly. And when asked why her phone pinged a router downstairs at 2:09 a.m., she asked for a lawyer. That alone was enough to shake the silence. The task force had a new theory. Not that Tamla fell, but that she may have been pushed. The railing on the balcony was just over 3 feet tall, but Tamla was 5 feet 5 inches, physically fit, and had no alcohol tolerance according to her husband. Yet her blood alcohol level was found to be .238, nearly 3 times the legal limit for driving. Too drunk to climb over? Maybe. Too drunk to fight back if someone shoved her? Also possible. A biomechanics expert was brought in. His report was damning. The injuries sustained are inconsistent with a simple fall. The angle of impact suggests a rotation, possibly caused by a forceful push or sudden imbalance. The media seized on the new findings. Experts say Tamla Horsford may not have fallen alone. Unsealed files suggest witness tampering in Horsford death. Bodycam time stamps raise questions in Georgia mom's mysterious death. But what the public didn't know yet was that there was another recording. A voice memo, recovered from an old backup of Tamla's own iCloud account. She'd recorded it weeks before her death, after an argument with a coworker. It wasn't related to the party or the people there, but it revealed a truth Tamla had carried silently. I don't think people like me here, she said in the memo. I try to laugh it off, but sometimes I feel like I'm just tolerated, like I'm on the outside of every room I walk into. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a moment of vulnerability. A black woman in a mostly white community, trying to make friends, trying to be accepted. The recording devastated her family, not because it proved anything criminal, but because it confirmed that Tamla felt alone, even before she died. And now the case was reaching a boiling point. Prosecutors had reopened the file as a criminal investigation. 3 witnesses, including Stacy Smith, were subpoenaed for a grand jury hearing. And for the first time, there was talk of charges. But before that could happen, something unexpected surfaced. A voicemail left for the homeowner, Gene Myers, just 1 day after Tamla died. Don't say anything until we talk. They're gonna twist it all. It was traced to Jose Barrera, the former court officer who had been fired for accessing Tamla's incident report from work. The final piece of the puzzle? The Forsyth County Courthouse buzzed with energy. A quiet tension filled the hallway outside courtroom 2B as reporters whispered into phones. Attorneys shuffled paperwork, and a familiar name once again took center stage. Tamla Horsford. 4 years had passed since the night she died. 4 years of unanswered questions, shifting statements, and growing public pressure. The official ruling still stood accidental death, but that was beginning to change. What triggered the shift wasn't new forensic evidence or a confession. It was a name, scribbled on the original party guest list, barely legible, and long assumed to have left before midnight. Her name was Samantha Wright, She had been quiet during the original interviews. No statements on social media. No appearances in documentaries. Her silence had made her almost invisible. Until now, Samantha had been subpoenaed after a private investigator, hired by a civil rights advocacy group, discovered inconsistencies in the initial timeline. She hadn't left early as once believed. Phone tower data showed her device still pinging near the Barrera home until nearly 2 a.m. When investigators finally tracked her down, she didn't refuse to speak. She said she had been terrified. Samantha's affidavit rocked the room. I saw Tamla go upstairs around 1:30 a.m. She said she was heading to bed. She didn't say anything about going out on the deck. But what she said next changed everything. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get water maybe 20 minutes later. That's when I heard voices. Not arguing, more like whispering. And the door to the backyard was open. She paused in the testimony. I saw Jose Barrera outside, on the porch. The room fell completely silent. Tamla wasn't there, but he looked like he was cleaning something. Jose had always claimed he was asleep when Tamla went outside, that he found her body early the next morning. But now, someone had placed him at the scene hours earlier. When pressed, Samantha added, I know what I saw, and I've carried it for 4 years. The implications were huge. The GBI had never mentioned anyone being awake after 1:45 a.m. No guest had ever publicly placed Jose outside. Now one had. Leander Horsford gripped the back of a courtroom bench. His lawyer leaned in and whispered, This might be it, the crack we've needed. The judge recessed court until morning. Outside, cameras flashed. Protesters chanted Tamla's name. And inside the building, the weight of truth was finally beginning to shift. Later that evening, a new headline began circulating online. Key witness surfaces in Horsford death. Jose Barrera now under renewed scrutiny. But just as the family began to feel hope, another name emerged. Someone who had never spoken publicly. Someone with a direct connection to the party, and a secret they'd kept since the night Tamla died. And that person was ready to speak. Who were they? And what had they seen that night? The wrongful death lawsuit moved quickly through Georgia's civil courts, but what happened next wasn't part of any official record. It was whispered in hallways, shared in hushed tones, and slowly it began to reshape the entire case. A former forensic technician who once worked at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation came forward through her attorney. She claimed she'd been pressured to adjust language in Tamla Horsford's autopsy report before it was finalized. According to her sworn affidavit, a supervisor told her, Make sure it leans suicide. The politics here are delicate. The revelation hit like a lightning bolt. The Horsford family's legal team moved to depose her immediately. In her video-recorded testimony, she confirmed that internal memos were exchanged about the optics of calling Tamla's death undetermined. The fear? Public backlash, especially with the presence of alcohol and race as central tensions. But there was more. She recalled seeing photos of Tamla's hands, taken post-mortem. In her words, they looked defensive, like she grabbed at something, or someone. Those photos, for some reason, were not included in the final case file shared with Tamla's family. A subpoena was issued. Within days, a secure GBI drive was handed over to the civil court. And there they were, 4 high-resolution images of Tamla's hands, palms scraped, 2 fingernails broken. One had a trace amount of what appeared to be skin tissue beneath it. No DNA test had ever been performed. The room went silent when that was revealed in court. Tamla's sons sat behind their father, Leander, their eyes wide. Michelle, Tamla's best friend, gripped her seat so tightly her knuckles went white. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered again, holding signs that read, Test the nails. Tamla deserves the truth, and no more accidents. The civil judge paused the proceedings and ordered an emergency motion. All remaining physical evidence from Tamla's autopsy would be reopened, re-examined, and tested by an independent lab. That decision cracked the case wide open. The following week, a private DNA firm in Atlanta released its preliminary findings. Under Tamla's left thumbnail, trace male DNA was found, and it wasn't Leander's. The match was inconclusive, but it excluded the only man who had touched Tamla that morning, her husband. Public pressure exploded. Major networks picked up the story. Tamla Horsford case reopened after DNA discovery. Forsyth County under fire. Did officials bury evidence? The Georgia NAACP released a statement. This new evidence is not just a clue, it's a spark. And justice must now follow the flame. In Forsyth County, fear began to creep into the inner circles of those who had been at the party that night. Some began hiring attorneys. Others deleted their social media accounts. A few refused to speak to press. And one anonymous tip came in, a woman claiming she had seen more than she originally told investigators. She asked for immunity before speaking. The GBI agreed. She's scheduled to testify next week. And what she might say could change everything. The woman who stepped into the courtroom that morning had never been publicly named in the case. But everyone knew who she was. She had been one of the overnight guests. She'd played cards against humanity, laughed, drank, then vanished into silence for over 4 years. Now, she stood behind the witness stand, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw Tamla around 1:30 a.m., she said. She wasn't planning to go outside. She was saying goodnight." The room held its breath. She looked tired, a little tipsy, but steady. I remember that clearly. When asked why she hadn't come forward earlier, her answer was devastating. "There was pressure," she said, "from friends, from the sheriff's office. I was told, don't stir the pot. It was just an accident. But it never sat right with me. Then came the bombshell. I heard a thump, loud, sudden. I looked out the upstairs window and saw someone downstairs on the porch. But it wasn't Tamla." She paused. "It was Jose Barrera, the former pretrial officer who lived in the house and had accessed Tamla's incident file before being fired for it. He was crouched over something," the witness continued, "and when I came downstairs later, he was sitting alone, smoking. He looked shaken." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Jose, through his lawyer, denied everything. "He wasn't on the porch at that hour," his statement read. "These are fabricated memories, likely influenced by media, but the damage was done." The court ordered a full re-interview of all party guests. A new special prosecutor was appointed, and for the first time, Tamla's death was officially reclassified. From accidental to suspicious, Leander Horsford stood before reporters that afternoon. His voice trembled, but he spoke with clarity. "I lost my wife. My boys lost their mother. But the world didn't lose her voice. You all just heard it." Behind him, his sons held a banner, "Justice for Tamla." The Horsford family launched the Tamla Foundation for Equity in Investigations, pushing for reforms in how suspicious deaths are handled, especially those involving black women in predominantly white spaces. Meanwhile, the GBI confirmed the DNA found under Tamla's nail didn't match any known sample in the state system. It was uploaded to CODIS, the National DNA Database, where it remains waiting. Across the nation, Tamla's story sparked a deeper conversation about race, about credibility, about whose deaths get answers and whose don't, and about the kind of silence that can kill. If you're watching this, don't let this be the last time you say her name. Tamla Horsford. She didn't fall. She was failed. In loving memory of Tamla Horsford. Tamla Horsford was a beloved mother of 5, a wife, a friend, and a woman whose bright spirit lit up every room. She was known for her infectious smile, her kind heart, and the fierce love she had for her children. On the night she attended a birthday party meant to be filled with joy and laughter, her life was tragically cut short. Though her story has been marked by pain, confusion, and unanswered questions, her memory continues to inspire a growing movement for truth, justice, and accountability. Tamla's legacy lives on through her family, her friends, and the countless voices who continue to demand answers in her name. We speak her name not just in sorrow, but in power. We remember her not just for how she died, but for how she lived. Rest in peace, Tamla. You will never be forgotten. Is how we keep these stories alive, and how we make sure Tamla's name is never forgotten. Do you believe justice was served? Why do you think it took this long for the truth to surface? Share your thoughts below. If you found this story powerful, moving, or important, please don't scroll away. Like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell.